Hi, I'm Ed Highland, and welcome to Profiles. Today, a discussion of music and much more. We're honored to have as our guest Dr. JoAnne Stephenson. JoAnne is an active performer, lecturer, and masterclass presenter, and an associate professor of voice and director of the African American Studies at the University of Central Florida. Dr. Stephenson has also sung mezzo-soprano solos from Winter Park to England, Italy, and Switzerland, and all of that. Thank you so much for coming by. We have many, many different things we can talk about today, but I first wanted to find out more about you. Give us an idea. Where did you first get the idea that you wanted to sing, that you could sing, and embrace the music that you did?
Well, thank you, Ed, for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I come from a musical family. My father has a beautiful natural instrument. He's a bass baritone, and I grew up listening to him sing Nat King Cole and playing the piano. And my mother was also a pianist as well. In fact, she gave me my first piano lessons. So all of us grew up playing piano, and every Saturday we would go to a community music school and stay there for about 3 hours, I guess, taking theory, history, and piano lessons. And after a while, the competition between my sister and I with piano became too much for me. So when I got in 4th grade, I decided to start taking violin lessons. And it seemed that I had a knack for it, so I went through the rest of my my grade school, through middle school, through high school playing violin, and I ended up as the first chair concert mistress in violin. But I knew that going on into college that I did not want to play violin. But I was inspired by a violin teacher, Darwin Apple, who at that time was a member of the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. And he had me listen to a LP at that time of Leontine Price and of her opera arias, and to compare the line that Leontine Price was singing with the violin lines that I was wanting to produce. And I need to go back just a little bit, because my father and I also would go to choir rehearsal at a church every week, I guess, that they had it.
As you say, there must have been some singing in there along the way as well.
Yeah. But I was just singing, I think, mainly just to hang out with my father. I don't think I was taking it seriously. So we had a youth choir at the church, and we all just kind of got together, had fun, and sang, and it was no big deal. And then we had, I graduated to the Chancellor Choir. And there was a young lady there at the time whose name was Rita Days, who was a classically trained singer. There were also a couple of other people, but because she was younger, I could really relate to her a little bit more. And she had gotten a degree from, I think, Lincoln in Missouri. And so it was a beautiful instrument, and I think she kind of fanned the flame a little bit, that along with the Leontine Price LP. And I think I was just kind of hooked from there.
Now, some might say that you started music on the instrumental side, if you will, fairly early, but then the voice part came along fairly late in your life. And how did that change? Did one complement the other along the way?
Well, yes. First of all, with voice, it's not a thing that it's necessary for a person to start very early at, because there's natural maturation that needs to take place around the voice box, etc. So a lot of times, if a person is getting musical training, that is going to complement what they do down the road if they continue to stay in that field. And so even though I was singing, I was not taking lessons seriously. And so I was still learning about musical styles, understanding the different types of theoretical aspects that pertain to music. And I think that that's one thing that's actually missing with a lot of our young people today, that they've not had that exposure to theory at an early age. A lot of them find out that in high school or in college probably in high school and middle school, that they want to sing. They have a nice voice, someone has told them that, and that's how they go on and pursue that, but without having had a foundation laid. So I'm very thankful for the foundation laid. And I think I need to mention one other thing that happened as a senior in high school. I was playing orchestra for most of that period of time, and I was also always sitting in the pit when we did the musicals every spring. And so one spring, I think I had taken an acting class that spring too. There was no rhyme or reason, I was just doing things. So one spring, I decided to take, that last year I decided to take an acting class in high school, and then I decided that I wanted to try out for the musical and be in front of the stage instead of back in the pit. So the work that they were doing was South Pacific, and I thought, I'd like to do the role of Bloody Mary. So I did the role of Bloody Mary, and I think that was in fact my first professional, well, not professional, but musical debut.
Getting out there in front of the audience. Now, did that make a difference? So when you sang for the first time in front of an audience?
Well, I sang in church audiences, but church audiences love you. They're so
it's a captive
forgiving.
Audience here.
Yeah, and they love you. It doesn't matter. They know you. They love you. They don't care what you do, pretty much, you know. But standing in front of an audience that paid to come and hear us perform, and having a good cast of people at that time, it was exhilarating. And you know, we got a standing ovation at the end of most of our performances. So it certainly did something to fan the flame.
Does it concern you? You touched on it briefly, but and I'll use my own daughter as an example, because there's what she's exposed to from the music side, maybe a chorus, for example, in school. But as far as theory and some of the divergent forms of music, those are not always available, and if they are available, they're not really promoted all that much in the middle school and high school levels, it would seem, just from my limited experience.
Yeah, well, it's available, but not at the level that we had it. We went to a community music school, so we sat in a class for an hour, and a teacher would lecture on Beethoven and maybe play an example of a Beethoven sonata and tell us what to listen for. And he had also prepared workbooks for us to take home and study. We would also take theory classes like that, and in those classes there are graded books that still exist today, but we would have to go through the tests and then get them graded, plus the private lessons that we had. So that was certainly an advantage. It's as if I kind of fell into this as opposed to just plan to do it, you know. And having siblings who decided not to do this, I call it destiny.
Do you see, or are you concerned about upcoming generations getting this kind of exposure and furthering the lineage, the long history of music?
I think it's imperative that they get this exposure. I really do. It is certainly expedient for them coming into college, once they've decided to be a music major, that they would have had this exposure, because they come in then taking the rudimentary theory classes, history classes, things of that nature, and sometimes they're overwhelmed. A typical music student takes more than the 12 hours that's required, just because voice is 2 hours, there's a theory class that's maybe 3 hours or something like that. So they end up with 16, 17 hours per semester, and each teacher, of course, thinks that their class is the most important, so concentrate on my class. It's a lot of pressure on them. So if they have had that type of foundation laid prior to coming into college, it's going to make it much easier for them.
Do you see much in the way of the student who comes in now saying, well, if I'm going to do this, my goal, I want to be a rock star, I want to be a hip-hop star, I want to do, some other form of contemporary type music?
I see that a lot with private students, and I see classical music students that we've accepted come in with that kind of background and not wanting to let that go. But then the joy is for me as a teacher to expose them, say, to the music of Brahms or to a beautiful aria, to expose them to classical music that they would not have been exposed to if they had not studied and taken that class. And I've seen some wonderful things when I've matched students up with music that they'll sing forever if they continue to sing. So in other words, it's finding that composer or that piece that fits that student at that time, that they can get an aha moment. Oh, this is what my voice is doing. This is where my voice wants to go. This is what I'm supposed to be. Oh, this is what it's supposed to sound like. This is what it's supposed to feel like. Yeah, that's very exciting, very rewarding.
Got to broaden the base a bit, make sure they're well-rounded in all forms.
Sure, in all forms. And once a person gets a classical foundation laid, technically speaking, they can sing all forms. And the beauty of that, then, is that they don't sound like every other person out there imitating the sound that's in. So they have their unique style, they have their unique sound, and they have a healthy voice doing it if they're using the classical foundation that's been laid.
Well, let's change direction just as you change hats on occasion and talk a little bit about the African American Studies program. Give us some idea of its roots, if you will, and what it's up to at the University of Central Florida. And I would guess there would be some collaboration too with the music elements. Tell us about it.
Well, the African American Studies program was started in 1997, so it's a relatively young program. The prior director left 3 years ago, and I've been in, this is my 3rd year in. And yes, there are some obvious collaborations. As I was working toward tenure at UCF, I began, well, it started before then, with a Margaret Bond song entitled Minstrel Man. This song spoke to me. The lyrics were by Langston Hughes. The music was by an African-American female. The influence was kind of jazzy and very soulful. In fact, she says at the very beginning of the piece, con alma, with soul, as opposed to maybe andante or adagio or whatever. So it's a very soulful piece, and it's about a person that wears minstrelly on the face, put the black face on, and they do the dance and they sing the song. But inside, he says, you do not know I die, I die. So this song spoke to me, and the way she said it, the text, was just really beautiful. So I did my doctoral work on Margaret Bonds and some of the other pieces that exist, because when you find one piece that's great by a composer, let's dig in there and see what else is there.
Gems are everywhere, yes.
Yeah, and I found some wonderful things. In fact, a lost work that I'm sure she put away just so that someone like me can go investigate and see that this exists. And so as I worked toward tenure, I pursued the love for music by African American composers. And having had a strictly classical training, I was not exposed to a lot of music by African American composers. So thanks to Willis Patterson, he compiled a book, Music by Black American Composers, and there were a lot of things there. Since then, of course, there have been several compilations of music or several venues to check to see where these people have placed their music or have left their music. So I studied and searched for works by William Grant Still, Florence Price, and did presentations. And the music program had a very successful class that's taught by Jeff Rupert called The Evolution of Jazz. And that class draws a lot of students, both music students and music from African American studies, and it is a part of our curriculum. And I thought the evolution of jazz is great. It's a very extensive, broad subject, but blacks have contributed more than just the jazz genre. And if you go back and you look and you start with the Negro spiritual, which in and of itself is a very beautiful medium genre song, it's just a heartfelt piece. When you go back and you look at the spiritual and you start tracing the music, it's very fascinating to see what you find. So I think I digressed a little bit. What was the original question?
Actually, I was sitting here fascinated. We were talking about how the coalition, if we will, how the African American Studies program and the music program are somewhat linked, and I think you're really heading down that path, really.
Oh, okay.
Because you in your own discoveries were finding the history and the relationship that was much deeper than many people, even yourself, realized when it came to African American composers, and you were going a little bit into the history there. And I guess we're kind of heading in the direction of how that is incorporated and becomes a part of the African American Studies program.
Okay, so I'll stay on that road a little bit more, and then I'll get back on the African American Studies program. I began to investigate, and I looked at the Negro spiritual, and I had a love for it because at that point, a lot of the pieces that I ended up with on recitals were spirituals. And so they weren't just the classical spirituals that were set by H.T. Burley or people of that nature, but they were also other settings, say the settings of Jackie Hairston or Shelton Becton or people of that sort. So I would end up with spirituals, and then I thought, and then of course we see the mixture in the spirituals of jazz influences and things of that nature. So I began to study, and I do a little research, and it's just amazing to see that from the spiritual we then get blues, and then from the blues one could draw a line tangent toward the jazz era, starting with the classical music on down. But then you also have the classical composers that were composing music at that time, and you see their influence coming through also. So it's just a fascinating thing to study and to draw a tree and to see a tree of how just from this one very authentic, very indigenous genre from America, all these forms of music spring. And the most fascinating thing to me at the time was that people like Elvis Presley and things of that nature.
That was the other line that was drawn, if you will.
Sure. Were so very much influenced by jazz singers and blues singers at the time, and they learned a lot of what they learned from African Americans. So I'm passionate about this class that I teach, which is an Intro to Music by African Americans. I have a lot of fun because I'm playing music that I love, music that I grew up listening to, but I also have a lot of fun just opening the students' eyes and making them aware of this connection and broadening their horizon, that it's much more than just jazz. You know, we've done so much more.
The music and the history was there, but it seemed to have been, I don't know if buried or suppressed would be the right word, but it wasn't coming to the forefront. And it seems really kind of late in our history. I mean, we're into the 2000s now that we're starting to rediscover some of the roots, the very elements you're talking about that took place 40, 50, 60, and more years ago.
Yeah, and that's what's really exciting about it. As I said, coming up with a classical background, I just was not exposed to it. I got the historical figures, the main figures, Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, people like that. But what's exciting about this 21st century is that as we compile classes and we get information together to distribute to the students, we can incorporate these things, and we can give students little nuggets so that as they continue their education, which some of them will get a master's and doctorates, they have an idea. Oh, let's see, I studied Margaret Bonds with Dr. Stephenson. I really like this piece. You know, I'm going to check that out and see what else I can find. Or, oh, William Grant still has an archival section in Arizona. Oh, let me go over there and see what he has. It's exciting. It's thrilling. I did a performance not too long ago, and a friend of mine had given me a copy of an out-of-print manuscript of music by African American composers, the very first compilation that was put together. And to me, it's like it's a prize, you know? I can't wait to get in there and dig in there and perform some of these pieces and present them to the world. And when you think about what the African American composer went through during the late 1800s, the early 1900s, and all this, and still they produced this music, it's incredible. It's incredible to me.
And is much of it preserved? I guess there were many instances where things are, frankly, probably lost now. But you mentioned the manuscript that you've got and other bits and things that were lost and had not been exposed to other people. In one instance, you dug some out, but the other pieces that were created, the other works of art, the genius really that is out there collectively. Is there an active effort to try and compile and save these works?
It seems to be an unspoken thing that's going on among African American scholars in music, that they're digging out. They're not preserved in one place for the most part. There is a collection of Marian Anderson papers housed in Pennsylvania, and there are the William Grant Still collection that I mentioned that's in Arizona. But a lot of these things have to be dug out, and we have to search for them on our own. But black scholars that are coming up looking for dissertation topics are looking, particularly ones that are vocalists, are looking for the vocal pieces that exist and have a desire and a heart to bring them out to the forefront. There are conferences. There was a conference in Daytona in Ohio. Dayton, Ohio, sorry. Florida, Daytona, Dayton, Ohio. There was a conference there, though, where African American women got together and they presented their works, either the works that they composed themselves or works that they found from others. So, yeah, there seems to be an unspoken effort to really bring these to the forefront.
Now, the African American Studies program obviously is for more than just African Americans to learn more about the history and such. Are you finding perhaps that would be a vehicle for spreading the message, spreading the word, if you will, that whether you're African American or not, you too can reach out. Maybe you can find some of the nuggets, some of the lost works or the works that are out there but have been buried for so long?
Well, sure. I mean, I would want to present that in my class, the Intro to Music by African Americans. I would want to introduce possible composers or even composers that or performers that we know about. Over the Christmas break, I heard a Louis Armstrong piece, "Is That You, Santa Claus?" that I had never heard before. And so there are even recordings that are old, that are lost, that could be found. But I certainly, and I don't think that you're suggesting this, but I certainly would not limit it to just music. There are historical things, there so many other different avenues that African Americans have excelled in that need to come to the forefront and need to be incorporated with what we're doing.
Are you finding it kind of hard to believe that here we are in 2005 and we're just, even now, we're still talking about, bringing to the forefront some things that, frankly, if you'd been white, it would have already been there. It is there and clearly seen. And in some instances now, we're uncovering a large part of our past that is a part of all of us, but hasn't been really incorporated into our spiritual being.
Yeah, it can be a little disconcerting, it really can. But in the African American Studies program, one of the things that I've instituted is a lecture series. And in this lecture series, I have invited guests, but also faculty members from the university come and present their works. Because a lot of times with the tenure earning process, you're told to present as far away as you can, as often as you can. And so to have the scholars come and present their works to us and to the classes that we have is encouraging to me, that not everyone is out on the periphery trying to come in and lift this information and bring it out to the forefront. There are some people that are right there and they're on the cutting edge of information and are disseminating it where they go.
Do you still find time in all this to not only enjoy the music privately, but also to share with us at concerts and performances throughout the course of the year?
Yeah, last semester was really a pretty busy semester concertizing, and it was fun, but it was busy. Mm-hmm. And so, music, with singing, and singing in particular, you have a certain time frame. We mention other instrumentalists or composing, say, for example, a person can compose until they can't write anymore, can't remember the notes or whatever. But for singing, there is a specific time frame, just because physiologically, after a certain time, the body changes.
We all do, yes indeed.
Yeah, so I'm not really willing to let the singing go until it forces me to do that. So I'm just kind of juggling both things right now.
And do you find that a part of your performance you like to find, like the lost Louis Armstrong piece, or some of the other elements, you like to feature those as well, just to give broader exposure to those?
Of course, when I can, and if I find something that speaks to me, I certainly will find a way to program it. But also another exciting thing that's happening is that people are beginning to write for me now. In November, Wallace Cheatham is a composer in Wisconsin, and he wrote a piece in August, and he sent it to me. And he said, "I wrote this piece with your voice in mind." Well, okay, that's very flattering. And then I looked at the piece, and it was very difficult. But he and I programmed this piece for a concert in November, and we presented it in Pittsburgh. So I like getting new music, as well as particularly arrangements of new spirituals, but also going back, like with the manuscript that I mentioned earlier. It's going to be just a joy to go in there and find those pieces that fit the voice and just sing themselves, basically.
So it sounds like a mixture of some of the old and the past, which we're all trying to retain, and also some of the new collaborative efforts to showcase, what is being done now among not only the African American community, but the other musicians of the world.
Yeah, I mean, we are their voice. They write the music for voice, but they don't dare sing it, because that's not what they want to do. They want to compose it. So we are the vehicle for them to bring those things to the forefront. And if someone writes a piece for me, I'm going to do what I can to make it happen. So.
What's next for, say, the African American Studies program? I mean, would you like to see it expand further? What kind of response are you getting from the faculty and from the students?
The faculty is very responsive to the program. It's a matter of finding time to fit it in. As you're well aware, the faculty on campuses are bombarded with so many things that they have to do. It's just a matter of finding time to fit this information in and to be an active part of making the program grow. But I have a wonderful advisory council, and I'm really looking forward to us coming together and jointly preparing classes for students to take.
have to come by and see
Yes.
how it's all going along.
Please do.
JoAnne Stephenson, thanks so much for coming and joining us today and sharing with us. And we'd like to have you back sometime. Will you come join us?
Thank you, Ed. I'd be happy to come
All
back.
right, maybe we'll get a little hint of that singing along the way.
Maybe.
We'll try that next time. Thanks once again for joining us, and thank you as well for joining us for another edition of Profiles. My name is Ed Highland. Thanks so much for joining us.